Today on the podcast, we have Adam Stark. He's our first foreign military veteran that we've had on the podcast, and he talks about his time in the Israeli Special Forces, transitioning into earning his MBA, and starting a tech real estate company that is making waves in the industry. It's a great podcast. Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoy the episode.
Most people you talk to when transitioning out of the military have never actually transitioned out themselves. You're probably getting a bunch of opinions from people who plan on staying in until retirement and have no idea how to actually show empathy for your situation. This podcast is about providing fresh perspectives and a front row seat for conversations with successful veterans doing big things after leaving the military. I actually just came back from your neck of the woods up in the St. Louis market. My brother's wedding was this past weekend, so we were up there for very quick, very full time.
Yeah,
but
congrats, man.
yeah, it was a
That's
great
awesome.
time. I actually
Awesome.
saw a
Glad to
Cardinals
hear
game
it.
too.
Nice. Did they win?
They did not.
Can't win them all, yeah.
They
Can't win them all.
got blown out, but the next night they blew out the Nationals, so it was a 1-for-1.
I slept on baseball for a while, and frankly, I don't know what your guys' opinion is, but I don't love watching baseball on TV. It's just a little bit too drawn out, and it's like the one angle, and it's okay, got it. But we went to a Brewer game when we were in Wisconsin too, and it was amazing. It was like the highlight of the trip, actually. Like with my kids and everything, it was phenomenal. So going to the games is actually incredibly fun, and they make it really an awesome experience. So
Dude, what I love about MLB is every ballpark's unique. It's its own atmosphere, environment, unique experience, and so because of that, Liz and I have a goal of going to every MLB ballpark, going to a game at every one.
that's awesome.
Nice.
I've not been
Yeah, I
to the
agree.
Brewers before. Definitely need to do that one. I almost caught a foul ball at the Cardinals game. I was
Oh,
very
yeah?
close. It actually smacked. It was like right over my head. I even jumped trying to get to it. It was a screamer. It smacked the dude in the back. Probably broke a rib. I mean, it was coming in. So it's a good thing it was higher because I would have broken my hand or something else trying to get it.
Yeah, underrated how fast those, whatever it is, foul balls come at you.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. We were right along the third baseline. So, this was a right-handed batter that had pulled the hit. I mean, so that thing was screaming.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I hear that.
But yeah,
My glory days are over because my stepfather used to work at Boeing in the area. And with Boeing, they had like box seats at all of the local sporting events. And like randomly, probably once every other month, he'd just be allowed to, invite his family to come. And I'd always be going to those. I mean, that was like Jack, you were talking about going to games being fun. That was really a treat. That was really awesome. But yeah, he's not there anymore. So there goes that.
Well, my kids are perfect age too. I got 3, 5, and 7 right now, so they're like they ate it up. And the
Yeah.
Brewers did a great thing. They had a ton of free entertainment for the kids, like t-ball, batting cages, and timing your base running and stuff like that. So I mean, they
Nice.
loved it.
That's awesome.
Tommy was a little. He's the 3-year-old. He was a little questioning the mascots, the mascots at the Brewer games are just giant sausages. So they're like, I think there's 5 of them that race during the 7th inning stretch every single game. And they obviously walk around, and he saw them and he was like, what the hell is that? He was like not having it.
Good for him, man. Good for him.
I don't blame him. He's got good discretion then.
Yeah. Question
Exactly.
the sausages. I guess not.
Yeah. Yeah, good for him.
Yeah, he was the fastest the base running time between the family.
I mean, I did. No.
You still got it, baby?
No, I mean, frankly, Palmer is our middle child. She's an athlete, dude.
She can burn.
Yeah, she's just like got long, thin legs, and Margot is older, but she doesn't. I mean, I think Palmer is going to be our star on the sports field. So
Margot's got plenty of other very impressive things going for her, especially on the chessboard. So
right, exactly, right. So
nice. Well, Adam, we're excited to jump in here, man. We would love to start by kind of an overview of your military experience and background, even before that. And then, of course, the kind of focus of the show is your transition period out of the military in the private sector into what you're doing now. But you're a bit unique. You're the first foreign military veteran that we've had on the show. So with that kind of framing, we'd love to hear about your experience, your service, your time in the service, and then, kind of the arc of your path afterwards.
Totally. Yeah, I was born in California. I grew up to immigrant parents, which is a pretty unique experience. My dad's born in Hungary. My mom's born in Morocco. Jewish family, and that's actually why I exist. They both had to essentially flee where they grew up. My dad because of World War II. My mom because of, if you look at historical kind of migration or migration patterns out of the Middle East in general, it's just a massive kind of void of Jewish demographic in the years that my mom had to flee from, just life-threatening environments. And they both ended up in California, where I was born. So grew up, I don't know if anyone listening, if you guys are familiar what it's like growing up with immigrant parents. There's definitely some good and bads. The good in it is very family oriented. So very tight family. I remember every weekend at a minimum, just spending time with my grandparents, my cousins. We were all in the same city, generally speaking, LA area at the time. What it also, in the bad is you gotta a lot of chores, you gotta earn your keep, right? Which at the time maybe I didn't appreciate as much. Now looking back, I really appreciate it, and I think I'm gonna have to go ahead and pass that along to my future kids. Sorry to them, but it is what it is.
Some early hustle culture.
Early hustle, exactly, early hustle culture. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, I had a great childhood growing up. We moved as a family to the East Coast and to New Jersey for my dad's work, kind of like mid childhood there, which I think plays a really interesting role, kind of like throughout my life, and also in that transition period where I've bounced around quite a bit. So California, New Jersey, Israel, where I also served. I'll touch on that in a moment. Did undergrad in Boston, then moved to New York City, where I really grew my civilian career, and now live in St. Louis. So I think that is really helpful, naturally so. Not that I would necessarily tell someone, yeah, move around a bunch in life, but I think it did actually help me a lot in that transition. It's just been, you know, adaptable in different environments and used to change. Going back to childhood, though, being that from immigrant family and them kind of instilling the importance of kind of like family life, protecting your own type of dynamic, living in Israel where there is a mandatory service, that kind of created my trajectory and my desire to, one, in some ways, yes, I had to enlist. In other ways, I didn't because, again, we were kind of back and forth, dual citizen. But two, it also kind of instilled the desire to, you know, do more in my service. And what I mean by that is anyone could enlist and decide to do anything between, we call it job nick, which is just a job, not doing a combat role, all the way up to, a special forces service, which is the track that I joined. And how that pipeline works is very similar to what I think today is like an 18 X-ray contract. So you sign up, you do your initial tests, mental and physical, you get a grade for those tests, and that allows you to then request tryouts to join the pipe for any SF unit, SOCOM unit, kind of trying to create, relatable terms here. So I went for what is, there's no like literal translation of a unit, but it's kind of like a Green Beret slash Ranger type of role in the IDF and the Israeli Defense Forces. It is an airborne SF unit with kind of like specialty in recon. So small teams, recon, you got air command, you do joint missions with other units as needed. So that pipeline was, did my entry program, got the grade I needed, requested to go into that pipeline. It is pretty much a 2-year pipe. How it starts is you kind of first do the airborne tryout. I'm not sure if you guys have that here or not, like a tryout to get in airborne brigades. Is that a thing here?
You have to go to the airborne school, but it's pretty much if you have a pulse, you pass that. And
Okay.
and anyone going to an airborne unit that's assigned to one is automatically going to be assigned to airborne school. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a gate.
As long as your ankles don't break when you hit the ground,
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're good.
Gotcha.
yeah,
Gotcha. Yeah.
high
Yeah. So
pass
they
rate.
actually, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So IDF actually does have I think it's a 4-day tryout, which, in hindsight it's really nothing. It's kind of just a bunch of running around and trying to just weed out people who don't actually want to be there. At the time, obviously, it's, going to be like the hardest thing you've ever done, type of a scenario, being real green and whatnot. Anyway, so if you're on the SF track, you have to first pass that to at least be in the airborne regiment, brigade. Actually, I always get confused with the translations of the terms. From there, you kind of just go through a week or 2 weeks of just doing nothing, essentially, getting your gear, getting assigned to where you're sleeping, this and that, until the tryouts come around for SF. And how that works is, and I'm gonna just do a side point here. I'm always amazed when people remember dates and specifics of timelines. And I'm so bad at that. I can't even remember 2 years ago. So bear with me and not remembering full on details here. So basically going into SF, the protocol is, you get assigned to like your immediate squad team that you're going to run that SF tryout with. And it is a 10-day event. It's pretty grueling. I remember a lot of just blood, doing a lot of crawling in like thorn bushes, them just screwing with you like, mentally. And quite a lot of people were weeded out in that process. So, I mean, I remember starting off for sure hundreds. A lot of people were there. And how it works is those who finish are then a part of a selection. So like the cadre get to choose who they want to then enter the actual pipeline. It's like a draft essentially, like a sports draft. So, we started like hundreds, and then I remember, that draft it essentially started hundreds. Getting through those 10 days, we ended up with like 150 maybe maximum. Then that got wet out until weeded out to, I don't know, like 50 or so. And then that pipeline therefore goes basically 2 years or maybe a year or 10 months at that point. And we ended up with like teams end up around 15 people to 8 people, depends on how many kind of go to officer school throughout that process or get pushed into some other track for, specialty purposes or whatnot. But it's that kind of a range through the pipeline. Very heavy on reconnaissance, very heavy on small team operations. Usually each person is going to have a specialty, again, very similar to how the US protocol runs. And basically after the year and 2 month mark is when they'll start kind of like weeding us in to whether it be like border patrols to, kind of it'll increase in terms of intensity and the level of, I'm blanking on the word I want to use here, not requirement, whatever, the level of intensity that they'll kind of like weed you into the team so long as you make it through the entire pipe, from like border patrol to kind of like backup for operations to going out on operations. So in that process, again, it's just a weed out, seeing who wants to be there, seeing who's passing all of the phases of the pipeline. And then at the end, they finally join the teams.
And is that all for one team? Like you mentioned the hundreds down to 150, down to 50 that you start the pipeline. Is that 50 all for, let's say, 15 or 20 of them make one team, or are those pass it and then they're spread out to existing teams?
So, oh yeah, great question. Yeah, so it's one team. So like the way that it's structured is to create this cohesive team from essentially day one until you finish.
That's really
Aside
cool.
from, yeah, it's a good
It's
process.
very
Aside
different
those,
from the US process, though, in that, there's existing teams with people that have
right,
20, 30 years of tenure and experience, and you're putting one new guy on that team versus a whole team of all new people.
correct, correct, yeah. And then exactly, both of them make a lot of sense. I think there's pros and cons to both, right? The pros in the US process is obviously you're like weeding in like green individuals to teams that are already like veterans in what they're doing, versus the IDF process. The pros in that is you're very close, right? Because you've gone through that entire process together. You know what everyone's about. You've spent time with everyone's family at that point. And the phasing is it happens through the pipeline, which is how they kind of, how we end up ready once we're a team. Said it's also kind of like a hierarchy process, right? There's 4 active teams. So like the green team is going to be doing the green missions until you kind of work your way up as the most veteran team.
Interesting. And you didn't do the officer route, correct? I assume the officers are kind of plucked out at some point. They go do a
Correct.
separate officer course and then they're reinserted to each team later on.
Yeah, so it's really, yeah, so I always just like being just, how I don't know any other better word than knuckle dragger. I mean, that was just me. I just liked just eating it, doing the hard stuff. That was always what I was intrigued by, always what I wanted to do, and that's what I did. Yeah, officers got plucked throughout the process, and they would either be sent to training, like training new teams, going through the pipe. They'd be sent to a variety of things, actually. I don't think I've ever really understand fully like the scope of that officer kind of program, but they're not always put back into the unit, which is interesting.
And so let's say, so like you didn't stay in for a career, obviously, but I assume your team, the nucleus of your team, some of them are still serving, or maybe I'm wrong, but if those teams continue on, how do they backfill people that leave? Do some select people from other
Right.
teams get reshuffled and they have fewer teams, or do some people, I mean, if everyone's going through the pipeline into a
Right.
new team, there's no pool of people to use to backfill existing teams, it sounds.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So again, the major difference there is the mandatory draft, right? So there's actually always just going to be a flow of people. So what ends up happening is you kind of age out of active duty, but you age out of active duty, but then you're also just immediately put back into reserve duty, which is also very active. So reserve duty is it's like twice. I mean, it actually just very much depends on what's going on at the time. So, you could be at a minimum of like twice a year, 2 to 4 months total. It'll be broken out twice a year, or you're doing significant rotations depending on what's happening. So generally speaking, that's the rotation. You could go to officer course pretty much at any point through the process. And if you do it late, for example, you could then go and, you know, lead a green team, for example. So there kind of is a cycle naturally,
Mhm.
again, because of the mandatory draft process and because of, heavy reserve rotations.
And when you age out, so to say, can you continue serving? Is there a choice to move to a different unit? Or is it like you've got this contract of whatever it is, 3 years, and then you're done?
Yeah, so yeah, generally speaking, you have that base contract unless, go the officer route. So in that regard, it's very different from the US military. Also, though, it's different in terms of the environment because lots of opportunities will open up for government sector work. So it's almost like if you want it to continue, it's almost like a pipeline to, government agencies.
Got it. Interesting.
Well, it's also it obviously because of the like just the way the structure is, I'm sure they got really good at training people really quickly. And there's just this training pipeline that probably it sounds what you're saying works really effectively to make cohesive teams to be able to accomplish the mission really well, even without people who have 25 years of experience, that are at the kind of even lowest levels, right? What year is this? Help me understand when you were doing this and when you served.
Yeah, yeah, sorry. So 2008 was when I enlisted.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice.
And you got out, was it 2012?
Yeah, exactly. 2008 to 2012, that was my, like core contract, my active duty. And then, reserve duty just kicks in naturally.
Nice. A little bit
Yeah.
of a polarizing question here, but do you feel like there should be mandatory service in the US?
It's really tough. So, my perspective, here, I'll put things into perspective, right? Israel is the size of New Jersey. Yeah. So and first of all, it's the size of New Jersey. Second of all, everyone essentially has the same value system, right? Is the same religion, generally speaking. So it's very hard to create that kind of comparison to the
Yeah.
US because the scale is just you can't even remotely compare. That said, what I think would be awesome in like my response to your question is if there was a mandatory service of some kind. So what I mean by that is, I don't know, 4 months of community service, like make that mandatory, right? If you had 4 months of community service, maybe that leads to doing more, but at least at a minimum, it's something. I think that would be a really nice thing to see, and I think it provides a lot of value for community, obviously, but also appreciation for where you live and the country that you're in that's providing everything that it is providing.
I completely agree there. Yeah, whether it's, a short stint of community service or international humanitarian work or something of that nature, it doesn't have to look like special forces service like what you did, but there's a whole array of things that can give back to
Yeah.
the community and the country.
Well, the United
Mhm.
States is just so focused on individual success. And, even as a kid, I suppose most kids are, if they're in environments that are trying to support their growth, they're told like you got to go to college, right? But college is a very individual success thing. It's no focus on your own grades, focus on your own attributes, and then that will get you into college. And I think there's some very clear benefits to having an outward mindset. And I know, Griffin, you were raised that way, and you had the moment I met you, it's an instantaneous understanding. Oh, you're like really, you care about the world, right? And that's something that's not as common in the United States, it seems.
Adam, what was as you were kind of aging out, so to say, did you look at other government service? What did that transition process look like for you? As it sounds like it's a little bit more natural for you guys since it happens to nearly everyone, but how did that
Yeah.
process go?
Yeah. So what's interesting is culturally speaking, you're not going to be like the 1% or whatever the insignificant percentage is that exists here, right? So culturally, you are accustomed to that process that exists, which is prep for military, go through military, transition out of military. That said, what was different for me, obviously, was being, dual citizen, living here, living there. kind of mixed culture perspective. And more than perspective is almost, it's great in a lot of ways. Where it kind of did me a disservice is it made me feel I had to do what Jack just said, college. I had to continue progressing per se. That was really tough. And I think that's what pressured me, psychologically speaking, to say, okay, I gotta go back to US. I gotta start college because I see a lot of my peers that I grew up with already literally working right after college, after getting a degree. And here I am, just finishing military service and hadn't even started university. So that certainly played a role. And looking back, I hate that was like a mindset. I think the rushing kind of energy that you just get from this system that exists, it I think it's proven to make less and less sense over time. That is, unless you have a specific track that you want to do. Shout out to my wife who's becoming a doctor. If you want to go through a track, become a doctor, become, I don't know, an engineer, something that really needs a trade in learning and schooling, then that makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, it doesn't need to be pressured as like a you know have to get it done, have to get it done quick, have to get it done now, have to progress, etc.
Yeah, we had another guest on the podcast who was an incredibly smart individual, but he was transitioning from service, pursuing college, and he actually got the guidance to maybe go to community college for a year. And then that community college was a stepping stone to get into Stanford undergrad and obviously led to a lot of really great things. So your point is incredibly valid. Don't just jump in. Don't feel like you have to immediately get into this pipeline unless you know exactly what you're doing. There is some benefit to just pausing and taking a time. And it's another really great point that we make almost every podcast. You don't have to jump into a 20-year career the moment you get out of the military. You
Mm-hmm.
can kind of pick and choose and figure out what's going to work best for you and your family. And it is a benefit to people to take just a deep breath once you're out and realize like there's a lot of things you don't even know about while you're in, and that space after getting out of the military can also help with that transition. So
Yeah.
Well, this flies in the face of the example that you and I set, Jack, and the path that we walked. But we've had several guests very wisely say, take that time after you get out. Don't
Mm-hmm.
feel like you need to try and double dip with another job right away as you're on terminal leave. Don't feel like you need to jump into something that's like the perfect next role that's going to last you for a decade of your life. Like some people took a few months and backpacked. Some people took a few months and just decompressed and figured out, kind of realigned their life, spent more time with their family, those sort of things. And every single one that has done that has reflected on it as some of the most important times they've had and one of the most important kind of ends to one chapter, beginning of the next, and really setting themselves up for success as they start their next thing after service. And so if I were to go back, I wouldn't rewrite my story necessarily, but I think that's a huge piece of advice. It's okay to take a few weeks, take a few months, as long as you have the runway financially, take some time for yourself and for your family and to reflect on what you've done, because it's probably been a lot. And it's okay to not to just sprint full head of steam into the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah. What's actually kind of interesting is in Israel, there's a big culture of taking the break.
Hmm.
However, it's taken to, in my opinion, a bit of an extreme where like a break typically means a year at a minimum. A year would be our cultural context here of a week or a month or 2 months, whatever, a few months. So like usually they're looking at a year plus. And I mean, obviously it's great because if you can do it, great, awesome. But at the same time, where it ends up hurting people like on the back end is okay. Then you got to look at, starting your career. If you're looking at school, then that's delayed even further, right? If you're looking at getting a job, then like growing your career is delayed even further. For then, kids coming in the picture, that being difficult point financially speaking. Once you finally get there, and the combination of like career growth, kids, school, however that plays out, it's a really difficult equation that I think what you just said, Griffin, is kind of the way I would recommend it, which is look at a few weeks to a few months, and then you got to just start because life's going to keep moving forward, and you got to kind of get somewhere.
That's a really interesting difference there. You ask any
Yeah,
American, they're like, yeah, man, I took a huge break. It was like 4 days and I was bored as
right.
hell. And so like ready to get back after it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's really a huge difference. It's pretty wild.
Well, it sounds like you had it in mind. You were kind of set on moving back to the States all along. Is that right?
Yeah. So, the reason I had it set was because of college, right? So I have to do college at some point. And then again, the pressure of just seeing my peers that, I grew up with already working post college. So that really put the pressure on me to be like, all right, yeah, I gotta continue with life, enough with, this like side thing that I was doing, which in a lot of ways kind of, I don't think that these resources like this conversation existed, like, podcasts, listen to other vets at the time, right? It was really just like Reddit forums and not many people talking about experience and what was a good way to go about it, what wasn't a good way. So I'm really glad that you're doing this because I think it's really important for service members to hear and transition vets to hear so that they can, have more informed kind of decisions and just context and decide on their own with information from other vets. So it's really cool. Anyways, yeah. So for me, it was just like once I got to the end of that, my track there, my contract, immediately I was just thinking, all right, I got to start life. So I went quite literally immediately. So I went from, it was really ridiculous looking back. I went like from operations to like 2 weeks later, if even it was 2 weeks. Yeah, I think it was exactly 2 weeks. 2 weeks later in a classroom. I mean, I was like in the shock of a lifetime. Like I just was questioning everything. Like I didn't know. I just looking around. What the hell am I doing here? It's a classroom of 18-year-olds. This is the first time they've ever left their house, and it was very shocking, not in a good way. It took a very long time for me to. It probably sent me back also, just in terms of transitioning to like civilian life. But yeah, that's how I went to my next phase in life.
Where was that at?
Northeastern University, so in Boston.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, and not to mention some slight differences, I'm sure, between Boston and Israel, across the gamut of what you're experiencing and things.
Yeah, especially so because Boston, always when I was applying, like when I was applying to schools, I was looking specifically for schools and cities because I know I didn't want to be like on a campus where I would especially not be able to find anything I could relate to. So, at a minimum, I'm in a city, it's a major city, and, I'll figure it out, whatever. What I didn't know was, credit to Boston for anyone who's there for university as like an 18-year-old and whatnot. It is like an amazing amount of schools there, like absolutely amazing amount of schools. And I remember specifically, which like really made me realize that was anytime there was like a holiday, like a Thanksgiving, for example, it was a ghost town. Like Boston was an absolute ghost town because all of these kids are going back to wherever they came from, their families, and not in school. So yeah. Anyway, so what I thought I was getting into, right? Like a city, it'd be mixed and this and that. I was familiar with New York City at the time. Anyways, what I didn't realize was it would be very heavy in terms of just college kids.
Interesting. So, what was your, after you graduated, talk a little bit about your timeline professionally as you kind of entered into the workforce. And yeah, not to fast forward all, but would love to
Yeah.
kind of lead that into what you're currently doing now. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, if you could talk through kind of that timeline.
Yeah. Easy, like fast forward. So through undergrad, I was working, like I was just finding different jobs because, I just had a lot of free time in undergrad, generally speaking, which led me to finding an opportunity when I finished in New York City working for real estate developers. So I was building high-rise mixed-use properties, managing the build out of those properties, redevelopment as well, which led me to what I do today. Today, I run a company called Jet.Build, which is real estate development and production management software. So basically, from my experience working in the space, I realized the gap and the necessity for a tool that can help you manage that process. So really, my business partner and I, who I know from service, same kind of a background, same story. We basically recognized the pain points that we had managing our own projects, built out the platform for ourselves before thinking of creating a business, realized that we created a platform that's very useful for the projects we were managing. And fast forward to today, which is, just skipping over like a decade, that's now how we have the software company supporting developers and general contractors.
Did you know all along you wanted to work for yourself or build something for yourself? Or did you kind of stumble upon it when you saw the need for that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And going back to working through undergrad, I was working at a few like corporate type companies, which was awesome because it made me realize that I don't like working at corporate type companies, which also goes all the way back to like my military service, being in small team environments, doing a lot of recon by myself in many circumstances. That was something I really loved. And I kind of see that as like a theme of my life and personality, where, again, going into those corporate opportunities, great learning experience, great understanding of kind of like management skills and how businesses are run and such, but also helped me realize I didn't like that. Then when I got to New York City working for developers, it was a family office. And if anyone's familiar with how family offices are run, a family, not mine, but it's very like sink or swim if you join and try to be a part of that because they don't have, it's not a corporate dynamic. They don't have all of this, infrastructure in terms of departments and such. So you are doing a lot of different, you know, overlapping kind of skills or department sets. So that was also a help in terms of understanding that I really liked that sink or swim mentality, right? Like understanding, okay, I like to do this, I'm good at that, I'm not good at this, which eventually led to me realizing, okay, yeah, this would be awesome to, do something myself. And especially so, find a close friend to do that with. In my opinion, that's a great way to work. Someone who you really trust and someone you know who to work with. Whatever that stigma is about like working with family or working with friends not being a good idea, I don't get it. I think it's a great idea. Who would you rather have beef with someone you don't really know and it's just a colleague and you're not going to really share the fact that you have, some issues with them, or would you rather be like a close friend or family member who you could actually talk through hard times with and truly and fully trust? So for me, it's the latter, and I really enjoy that, being able to work with someone I know.
Yeah, those are such great points. And it's crazy how military service doesn't necessarily indicate whether you are going to want that structure of the corporate environment or the freedom. And it's really hit or miss which one
Yeah.
you fall into. I love that you said that because you're speaking my language. I like to be left alone and doing my own thing. And the whole work with family and friends, Courtney and I, my wife, have really found success like with, but we've also had negative outcomes with working with friends and family too. It's hard. It's like the best of times, but also when things crumble, it makes it a lot harder as well.
Mm.
Are you with where you're currently at? I mean, are you saying the other co-founder, you're just really close friends with them, or are you hiring even employees and stuff within your realm and your circle?
So yeah, my co-founder, my business partner, someone I know from childhood. He was in Airborne as well. So I know him like really throughout life. And then he also, right, he worked for developers as well in New York City. So we just, really tracked the same throughout life. So he's my business partner. And then in terms of other team members, we always first and foremost try to look to like network of people that we know. When there is an opportunity to, bring someone on board that is actually a friend, then we try to do that as well. Definitely have a soft spot for veterans too. So if someone is a veteran, then they're like they'll have priority status in my book for sure.
I love that you said you kind of tried out the corporate big company experience and realized that you wanted to be with work for yourself. You wanted to be more left alone. How do you counsel others, or how would you recommend to others to kind of feel out which one is for them? Because I think a lot of people, like Jack's saying, there's no real accurate predictor of which one is going to work for you. And I think some people are actually surprised which one they prefer more when they get out of the service. So do you have any recommendation on how to kind of feel
Mhm.
that out, or how, how it worked for you to find the right path between those?
Yeah, I think this is also very similar advice. So what I gave my brother when he started like in the workforce, I said to him, because what I said to him is the same answer for you and your question, is I actually recommend working for a corporate or like a very established company first. Reason being is kind of what I mentioned earlier in my own story is it allows you to understand, okay, here's a business that's been around for a while. Here's a business that has dozens of employees. How did they do it right? How did they get there? They're obviously doing something right, regardless of if you like that environment or not. So learn from what they're doing, right? Learn from that structure, take away from that structure, again, personal learnings that you'll carry forward, and also take away if you enjoy that kind of environment or if you don't. So for me, like regardless, my recommendation is go to when I say corporate, it doesn't have to be the Boeings of the world. It could just be a company that's not enterprise. It could be a large business, for example, even a medium business with 80 employees. It's hard to get there. It's not easy to build a company that has 80 employees, that has 200 employees. So just learn what they're doing right, note for yourself, like takeaways, positive and negative, and then carry that forward, whether it be another, large company or a small company or your own company.
That's really great advice. Did you know pretty quickly that it wasn't right for you? And did you also work at a smaller company before jumping into starting your own? Did you have kind of like that gradient of experience where you worked for a large corporation, then worked for a small, maybe startup or smaller company where you had even more hats to wear, but still were not the one decision maker. Did you kind of follow that path as well?
Yeah, so it's actually really funny. I skipped over one experience in between working for developers and my company right now. So I was, working at this family office of developers, which is actually it's like a small, medium-sized company. They build large projects, but nonetheless, a small, medium-sized company. COVID happened, and I was in New York City, and it was absolutely a wild experience. Like literally everything was closed. I mean, I was something that's really cool, actually. I mean, not that I would wish this upon the city ever, but I remember like in the heart of it, I was literally just riding up and down Park Avenue, across Brooklyn Bridge, just completely by myself, which I don't think will ever happen ever again.
Did
It,
you get a
it was
picture?
unbelievable. I do. I definitely do somewhere. When I say riding, I was on a motorcycle, so I wasn't necessarily with my hands
I
available,
don't want
but
to cause any accidents here.
that was just an absolutely unbelievable experience. Imagine being in New York City by yourself in on major streets that are otherwise too packed to move, right?
And you didn't see any
It's
zombies, did you?
no, those were only after hours. So
I literally have a picture of Courtney on Waikiki Beach in Honolulu, and she's the only person on the beach. Will never happen again. It's one of the most populated beaches in the world. Like,
Dang.
yeah.
yeah, unbelievable, unbelievable. So working for developers, everything shut down. So projects got canceled, and they really got screwed, So they essentially laid everyone off, myself included. Granted, after trying to retain us, so I really, lots of respect for what they were trying to do, and they really stuck with it as much as they can. Anyways, so obviously I had to look for a different opportunity, and not literally nothing in real estate was happening, real estate or construction. So I had to look elsewhere. I found a job at a startup, and my role there was chief of staff, where among the things I was managing was real estate and construction for the facilities we were running. So I did have like overlap. That said, I grew with that company. I was one of the first, I think I was like within the first 20 employees. We grew to a few hundred employees, raised a ton of money. And then they also got screwed because of the VC model, which a lot of people got screwed on and continue to get screwed on, which is something I could dive into. But so what I had to deal with was a rapid increase and then rapid decrease in terms of operations, employees, and just really everything across the board there. So now to answer your question full circle is, I just happened to have been able to experience like the corporate type roles, that medium size, family office, sink or swim type roles, a startup where we ramped up to a large company and then ramped back down. And then that segued into my current company, Jet, which we were building in the background kind of almost all throughout.
Wow. That's pretty fortuitous that you had such an array of experience to set you up for
Yeah.
what you're doing now. That's really cool. So to speak towards what you're doing now with Jet, could you talk a little bit more about what it is, the kind of problem that you guys are solving? And also, I mean, we could take a couple minutes and talk about, it sounds like you haven't raised capital or maybe you haven't raised VC capital. So we'd love to hear kind of how you're building it and how you're approaching some of those decisions.
Yeah, definitely. So Jet is very much nitty gritty in the weeds, operations, day to day project management software. So keep that in mind, right? It's very specific for day to day operators. It's very specific for the industry. That said, to create like some form of context just for anyone listening, most people are aware of like QuickBooks, for example, or like Salesforce, for example, right? So you wouldn't ever go to a company, especially one that is scaled, that has, dozens of employees, that doesn't have a QuickBooks or equivalent accounting software, right, to manage payroll. You also won't go to a marketing or sales company that doesn't have a Salesforce or HubSpot, for example, right? So these are just standard, I'll call it project management, just for generic purposes, project management tools that any organization needs in order to run operations of that business. So that's exactly what Jet.Build is doing, is it's running operations from pre-construction, so like planning phases of a project, all the way to project closeout, right? And what that entails is if you look at really the room you're sitting in, the room on any facility or infrastructure that anyone's sitting in, you look around, you have lighting, you have flooring, you have plumbing, you have everything in between. And what that is on a construction job is those are all different companies. Those are all different trades. Then you also have design teams, which is another company. Then you have the lender, which is another company. So how are you coordinating dozens of external stakeholders to collaborate on a single project from planning all the way to closeout? Logistics, everything, finances, reporting, operations, and everything in between. So that's exactly what Jet is doing, is it's a central command center for whoever's the license holder, which typically is either the developer or the general contractor or both, managing their respective stakeholders, teams, data, reporting, et cetera, in a central tool and a central platform to make sure that the project is moving along properly, teams are paid, performance is tracked, issues are managed, data is retained. And that's what Jet is doing. The general pain point for those that are listening and potentially those that are in the industry and say, oh, I know that product. The general pain point that we experience is there's really one industry leader. It's called Procore. It's a public company. They did a great job in terms of, I mean, they're a huge company. They got 4,000 employees, like I just said, public. At this point, they're really a enterprise GC platform. Very expensive product. They're very robust. So if you're not like a McCarthy, a Turner, an Arco, like one of these huge national builders that needs 3,000 options and every single button and, every type of controls that are ever going to exist in construction, then really Procore is not geared towards you anymore. Like they've grown into the enterprise platform that is costing out the long tail of the market. So small, medium, and large businesses in reality. So that was a pain point that we experienced, is that we, meaning my business partner and I, we weren't working for a Turner, right? So we weren't that enterprise client that needed an enterprise platform. So we were not only priced out of that solution, but it was also just irrelevant for us. It was too much. So that's what we built Jet for, which is the long tail of the market. It's a modern, cost-effective, and just easy to understand and use platform for anyone in the industry. So that was the kind of the pain point that we solved for. That's what we're doing. That's what exists in the market. And then in terms of, I think your last question there was like the fundraising aspect. So what really kicked us off as a company versus just, building it for ourselves was we had some early pilot adopters who are still with us today, which is awesome, which one gave us validation that yes, this is not just us telling ourselves that we're great. We're seeing that other people are using it and liking it, which allowed us to raise capital. So we did a kind of a friends and family angel round. Terminology is, whatever, it's interchangeable essentially. So we did, an investment round that allowed us to say, okay, yeah, we're going to now focus on Jet full time. We're going to put some capital against it to grow the product, grow the brand, and grow the business overall.
That's awesome. Sounds like it's been that's quite a product to build. And it doesn't sound like you had a specific software background. So I have to imagine you've learned quite a bit along the way and had a lot of growth and forging experiences along with your business partner. So it sounds like it's been an incredible experience and you built something really special. It seems that's cool. I'm sure it's not something you imagined doing before starting school at Boston, decade plus ago.
Yeah, totally not. And, on that point, what you just said is a shout out to my business partner, who is just an absolute coding monster at this point. And just as a general point, starting a company is not for the faint of heart. You need to be able to just put your head down and just be an absolute grunt and just plow forward. There's no other way to put it, and there's no better way to say it other than if you're a veteran, that is what you need to pull from, is just remembering how you can just put your head down and plow forward. That's exactly what you need to do. It is absolutely not easy. It is an absolute roller coaster. However, it is also very fulfilling at the same time. In the moments where it's fulfilling, it's very roller coaster-esque.
For sure. Well, as someone who said you liked and wanted to do the knuckle dragging and also
Exactly.
remember only blood from Special Forces pipeline, it sounds like you were uniquely fitted for the entrepreneur life. So
Exactly, but
you've lived into that.
that's what I was talking about. You'll see this thread throughout my life is very consistent, very consistent.
For
Just
sure.
self-hatred and
Yeah. Well,
Exactly.
Adam, there's a two-part question as we kind of wrap up here that we ask every guest. It's one ask and one give. So starting with the ask, what's one thing that somebody listening to this could do to help you or your business?
And if you know any general contractor, real estate developer, period, always happy for intros. And it's actually a massive help for me and what we're doing. No expectation. They get to have a look at a, modern tech, new platform. If it works out, amazing. If it doesn't, like I said, it's an intro and hopefully they learn something from what we're building. So that's always a big time help.
Awesome. Is that any size GC or company or type of property? I assume mostly commercial stuff.
Correct. It's commercial grade. So what I mean by that is if you know a GC or sub, for example, that it's doing like kitchen remodels, there won't be a match. We're not built for that kind of that scale. We're built for commercial scale. So if you're doing ground up anything, that's where Jet is relevant.
Nice. Awesome. And then the second part of that is one give. So if you have any recommendations, piece of advice, words of wisdom for those that are listening.
Yeah, I want to say find your new purpose. This will be, veteran driven. It's not easy and it might take a really long time, but I think that's the most important thing you can do in order to kind of move forward and not get stuck in the in between, which is that transition period, is find your new purpose and be open to that purpose changing, right? You don't have to think you found something. If that doesn't work out for you, then don't get stuck in the rut, right? You just find a new purpose. That could be religion, it could be family, it could be work, it could be a mix of all of the above, it could be wellness, whatever it may be. Just find something and stick with it to allow yourself to move forward.
And I would also add if someone has interest not only in the construction built environment, but in good conversations, Adam, you do have a great podcast, Veterans Who Build show, and where you talk, correct me if I'm wrong, you talk to other veterans who are in the construction world. And so if folks are interested in that space or just exploring options, that's a tremendous resource for people. And thank you for what you do, not only for veterans, but also having those open dialogues and sharing those with everybody. So that I think that's great stuff that you put out. And you've been you're going on 2 years, right? So you've been doing it for a little bit now.
Yeah, exactly. Doing it for a little bit. We release at a different pace. So, first of all, what you said is absolutely correct. It's the Veterans Who Build show. It's for any veteran in the built environment. So that could be anything that touches real estate, from lending to construction to trades to suppliers. We're also going to be adding very soon, will be the first episode of veterans who help veterans, right? So also kind of an interpretation of Veterans Who Build. So like those who are doing nonprofits as an example, just to add a little bit more, variety to the show. And the purpose of the show, generally speaking, is to first and foremost honor veteran stories, and second is to create this roadmap for veterans into a built environment. So we talk about transition period and we talk about translatable skills. Built environments is an awesome industry for vets. It's definitely in need of additional workforce, so it plays into kind of job opportunities. So hopefully we get to funnel some vets into an awesome industry by virtue of listening to other vets in the industry.
Sure thing. You talk about project managers or GCs. That is what veterans are uniquely good at. You spend your whole military career just managing disparate groups of people to accomplish one thing. That's usually like herding cats, and so you're perfectly skilled for that sort of industry.
Yeah, exactly.
Adam, this has been great, man. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us. Thanks for sharing your awesome story and for what you're doing for people, veterans and otherwise. And I'll just pass it back to you for any parting wisdom, final thoughts, or final words of advice for anyone that's currently transitioning or considering going through their own military transition.
Yeah, first of all, take advantage of the fact that you have so many resources out there now. A lot of these types of conversations where you can listen to other vets, find a vet that have relatability with, and then pull advice from them. That's what I eventually got to as of relatively recently, which led to creating my show. So now that it does exist en masse, I highly recommend you do that and pull bits and pieces from everyone's experience and everyone's advice who have already done it, so that you could better your process moving forward. I can't recommend that enough. I think it's super important.
Well said. Absolutely. Yeah, I wish I had heard these conversations or had this access a lot earlier on. It would have made a difference. Exactly. Although I think we ended up fine, so it works out.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Adam.
Yeah, thanks you so much, Adam. Appreciate you joining us.
Likewise. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Veteran Ventures Podcast. If you heard something interesting or found the show to be helpful, send it to a friend who is transitioning out of the military or considering a transition. We'd also really appreciate if you left a rating and review of the show. That helps us reach more people with these amazing stories of successful veterans. We'll catch you next time on the Veteran Ventures Podcast. And until then, go do the thing. Make that decision, have that conversation, and go find your next mission.